welcome to the Week 11 episode of Toss in the Pigskin. As always, I'm your host, Nate Smith. Got a great episode for you today. We're going to recap Week 10 against the spread, 3 new picks for Week 11, and our special guest this week is Kaelen Jones from The Ringer. I'm excited for it. Okay, we're going to keep this segment short because I want the focus of this episode to be on our interview with my special guest for this week. So we'll start with recapping quickly. Week 10 against the spread went 2-1 overall. Bucks minus 4.5 at the Panthers was an easy winner. Chargers at the Dolphins minus 3. I won't use the word easy, but Dolphins won relatively comfortably, so that was a cover. And the only loss was 49ers plus 9 at the Saints. Had a chance to cover, but just turned the ball over way too much. I think they ended the game with 4 turnovers. Despite the Breeze injury, it was not enough. Brings the season total to 14-16. Now, on to Week 11, 3 new picks. Patriots minus 2 at the Texans. The Texans are just a terrible football team, and I think the Patriots are getting, I won't say hot, a little bit warm. Pick number 2, Bengals at the Washington football team. I like Washington on a pick'em here. This D-line is going to cause a lot of problems for a bottom 5 Cincinnati O-line, and Joe Burrow's been good this year, but I think he struggles in this one. And last but not least, I'm on Miami once again, minus 3. They're going to Denver to take on the Broncos. Tua has impressed me, looked better than I thought he would. And this Miami defense, Drew Lock is injured right now. This is being recorded on Thursday afternoon. It's looking like he might not play. If he does, he's certainly not 100%. And do we really trust Grippin' Rippin' to cover against the Dolphins? No, we do not. Dolphins by a touchdown. And now it's time to welcome in this week's special guest. He's an NFL and college football staff writer with The Ringer, Mr. Kaelen Jones. Thanks for hopping on today, man.
Thanks for having me, Nate. Pleasure.
Of course. Okay, as we're heading into Week 11, man, there's a lot going on in the NFL right now. A whole lot of storylines. I kept it to about 3 or 4, time permitting. We'll see how many we can get to. But I want to start with, in my opinion, is the biggest headline going into this week, and that's the Drew Brees injury, which leaves the Saints, for lack of a better term, at an interesting quarterback position. Now, most people think they're going to go with Jameis. Obviously, the very weird Taysom Hill contract still exists. Don't really know why, but it exists. So let's just assume that Jameis is going to be the starter here on out until Brees can come back. For you, what can the expectations be for this Saints offense with Jameis at the helm?
It'll be really interesting to see how that marriage works, right? Because we know who Jameis Winston is. Very aggressive downfield passer. Last year ended up throwing 30 touchdowns and also 30 interceptions. Last year broke I believe, NFL record for like pick sixes in a single year with 7. So we know how aggressive of a player he is. And part of the reason why he went to New Orleans, at least from what has been reported, is that he wanted to learn how to slow the game down, be better with the football. I'm curious to see, whether or not the system is catered to, him being aggressive and pushing the ball downfield, because we've seen, not even just from a schematic standpoint, but from an ability standpoint, Drew Brees has not been able or willing to push the ball downfield. In fact, when you look at all the advanced stats about average depth of target, he ranks within the lower passers within the NFL this past year. So it'll be really interesting to see whether, they kind of let Jameis do his thing and be more willing and daring downfield. But from in the snippet that we saw against San Francisco last week, that wasn't the case. So I think, from what Sean Payton said after the game too, was that Jameis Winston has picked up the system pretty well. I think having a full week of preparation, the lead up into that Falcons matchup this week, I think that you'll see a little bit more conservative Jameis Winston as opposed to what we've been used to be seeing. But I don't think that it'll be, the production-wise, will be too different from what we were accustomed to before with the Saints offense.
Yeah, and I would add to that, I don't think he's probably ever had a true, I know Alvin Kamara's listed as a running back, but that dude's basically a wide receiver in the backfield. And you mentioned that Peyton scheme. And yeah, no secret at all, Brees' arm is shot. I mean, it's expected. He's an old man at this point. I know you bring up the metrics, and I saw too in completed air yards, he was either dead last or in the bottom 5. So, And this offense, as you mentioned, and I saw your article from a couple days ago about when Teddy Bridgewater came in last year. The similarities at this point in their careers between Bridgewater and Brees it's a much more seamless transition than this, where you talk about Jameis being the gunslinger, throwing a bunch of picks pretty much his entire career, and especially last year.
Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of agree with you though. I think he's going to sort of be forced, if you will, by Peyton and his coaching staff to be like, okay, this is our system. We know it works. Feed Thomas on the quick slants. Feed Kamara out of the backfield, because I'll say I don't think it won't last too long if he goes out there chucking 3-4 picks a game.
Yeah, exactly. And then we'll actually see whether or not Taysom Hill will play quarterback.
Right, yeah. I don't think they want to be forced into that, regardless of what they'll tell you. Okay, keeping this thing moving here, I want to focus on, and the Saints were a big part of this before the Breeze injury. I'm curious to see what you think about this. But the NFC as a whole right now, it's much more wide open to me than the AFC, which pretty much looks to be like the Chiefs and the Steelers at this point as the top two. But the NFC, I think you could make an argument for about 4 or 5 teams right now that could legitimately be in the NFC Championship game. So at this point for you, with about 6-7 games to go, who do you think is going to be the NFC Championship game if you had to call it right now?
Oh, man. If I was going to call it, I'd probably go with Tampa Bay and Green Bay. I don't know how that would land or shape up, but I feel like, I don't even know if I'd really trust that pick either, because look, Tampa Bay has just been so exactly. That's the funny thing. Like, I trust in that, the talent that they have, and honestly the coaching. But it just, for Tampa Bay specifically, this reference to them, they just have not been consistent. One week they'll look like the best in the league. The next it'll look like everything is out of sorts. One week Tom Brady will look like he's found the fountain of youth. Another week he'll look like a 43-year-old quarterback where he can't throw 50 yards up field. So it's really been this heckle and jive type of season for Tampa Bay. That's why I'm a little hesitant in picking them. But I think that they'll figure out things. Still have 8 games ago or 7 games ago. I think that they have time to figure things out and really get in sync. And then with Green Bay, granted, the biggest point against Green Bay is, again, that they don't have weapons outside of Devontae Adams. But the level of play that Aaron Rodgers played this year and the seamlessness of their system, the way that the defense has played this year and performed, I think that they have a really legitimate shot at, continuing that into the postseason, regardless of who they're matched up. I think that Rodgers is really the difference maker in that.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And with the Packers, too, the main reason I'm out on them as a true contender for this point is what you referenced. I saw your article a couple weeks ago. You wrote about the fatal flaws for each of the contenders. And, man, that Packers run defense, they can't stop anybody. And that just doesn't – I know in today's NFL it's a throw-first league, but if teams go into the playoffs and know that you can't stop the run, I mean, that is – I would agree with you. A fatal
San Francisco ate them up last year.
Right, exactly, right. That is a perfect example. They beat them twice in the regular season and then again in that championship game. And Jimmy G didn't have to do anything, really. Shanahan just ate him up, man. I wanted to get your take. I agree with you on the Bucs. That was one of my picks. And the Packers, it's hard to count them out with Rodgers. That man can make miracles. I wanted to get your take on the Rams, though. Do you view them as a team that could maybe do it? Because my 2 picks were the Rams and the Bucs. So, I don't know.
That's a good pick, too. See, and I was really tempted to pick the Rams. Well, looking at them, they've had, letdown performances like throughout the season, but that's interspersed with. I
hesitate with Goff just because when we talk about the top class of the NFC, pretty much all of those teams have a quarterback that can really take it over. Goff just hasn't been that guy. So that's my biggest hang up there, but I almost wonder if having Sean McVay is enough to mask that most of the time.
Exactly, and that's the thing. Like when Sean McVay has a running game, as we've seen this year and back in 2019 or 2018, actually it was 2019. 2019, they didn't have an offensive line. Nobody was really healthy. I know they lost Andrew Whitworth, but the whole of that offensive line is still there. They'll be able to run the football pretty well moving forward. What we saw last year when they didn't have an offensive line, they struggled offensively, and their defense was decent, but it wasn't good enough to carry them over the hump. When Sean McVay has a elite defense coupled with his masterful offensive play calling at this point, and what he's able to do in terms of making the game easy and simplifying things for Jared Goff offensively, outside of that matchup against the Dolphins, he's had a pretty up and down here, but mostly solid. It's been enough to get the Rams to this point. And I think looking at their defense and looking at the play calling, if you were going to match up any coaching personnel against anybody else within the NFC, I think the Rams probably have the best coaching tandem in the league when you talk about Sean McVay and Brandon Staley this year.
Yeah, Staley is put on a hell of a performance this year. He might be looking at a head coaching job soon with what he's done over there. Okay, quickly, this Zoom is going to time out on me soon, unfortunately. But last thing I wanted to touch on, we got a couple minutes left here. In the AFC, it's really cluttered after about the top 2 or 3 seeds. You got 6 teams sitting at 6-3. Yeah. Of those 6, I guess, give me maybe your top 2, and what do you really make of that cluster there at the bottom?
So my top 2 within that grouping, I go with the Dolphins, and then I go with the Ravens. I'm tempted to put the Raiders in there too, but I think those are my 2.
I agree. Yeah, I actually agree with you completely. I've been really pleasantly surprised by Tua. And, the Ravens, they've dropped a few. Last Sunday night in the rain in New England, that's a tough place to play. I'm not really going to hold that against them for the remainder of the year. The Lamar regression is concerning, and I know I've seen you talk about that too. It is, and I think part of that is an issue with Greg Roman too. The whole offense just seems a little out of sync. But when I'm looking at the Raiders, I just can't trust Derek Carr, and maybe more importantly, I just really can't trust that Vegas defense. So.
Yeah, it's not good. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time, man. I know you're a busy man. Love reading your articles, and thanks for joining the show.
Of course, Nate. Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks for watching the Week 11 episode of Toss in the Pigskin. Let me know what you want to hear about next week in the comments below. Please like and subscribe. Hope to see you here next week.